Hey folks, here we go with our first of what will be a few screencasts for the course. Today we're going to talk about the global economy, Alphabet Soup 2.0. All right, let's move with it. Nothing to review at this point. Okay, so both parts of the title of this presentation, Global Economy and Alphabet Soup, and if you are making that 11th grade connection to U.S. history with Alphabet Soup, both parts of this title perhaps indicate to you that what you are about to hear is a lot of information, and I want to recognize that. These are the key terms. The ones that are particularly important, or at least the ones that you're going to be hearing more of beyond this presentation, I've indicated in red. That is not to say that the ones in black are not important. In fact, you should have a sense of what all of these terms and organizations are at the conclusion of this presentation. All right, so our words. Alphabet Soup. Let's recall what this is from 11th grade history. So in the 1930s, you are aware that the United States endured what is called the Great Depression. The president at that time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, undertook an expansion of government in order to address the social and economic problems that existed during that time, and that's called the New Deal. Because there were so many different organizations and so many acronyms to balance, this is oftentimes referred to as Alphabet Soup, right? All sorts of acronyms. This political cartoon is obviously a critique of the New Deal. So the problem: depressed economy. The solution: New Deal programs, expanding government to address these concerns. All right, we see something similar on an international scale following the First World War. You have countries with depressed economies. The popular responses among countries enduring depression is to increase tariffs and sanctions in order to sort of reduce individuals purchasing products from other places. And that makes sense on the surface, right? You want to encourage domestic production and consumption of goods and services, and you do that by, kind of encouraging your people to buy American in this case, right? Give work, buy American goods. This, in theory, sounds like a good idea. In practice, it leads to collapse of global trade, as you can imagine. And in any depression, the ones who are really impacted the most are the poorest individuals. In this case, developing countries who are the producers of raw materials were particularly negatively impacted by this, what's called a beggar thy neighbor system. That's the problem. Here's a solution. July 1st to July 22nd, 1944, 44 different countries came together at Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. As you can see, it's kind of isolated and serene, quite beautiful. And again, the dates here are July 1st to July 22nd, 1944. Keep in mind, the World War II will still go on for over another year. Okay, so this is during World War II. The United Nations won't come along till another month after World War II ends as well. So this is a really innovative response and collaborative response to a global problem that is both wartime and preceding the United Nations. So I think pretty important things to note. So 44 nations were present. Okay, pause before we continue to talk about Bretton Woods. Really, the remainder of this presentation is really dedicated to what came out of those 3 weeks in Bretton Woods, the organizations that were developed and how they evolved, what they look like today. Before we do that, though, a couple other terms that are important to point out. NGOs, perhaps you've heard this term. What is it? It is a non-governmental organization. This is really anything that provides some sort of support to members or outsiders. It's really anything, any club or organization. I have the number 10 million NGOs that exist today. My source for that is Siri, actually. And I'm like, even if she's a million off, that's 9 million or 11 million. That's a lot of NGOs, right? Okay, so anyway, lots of NGOs. IGOs, these are perhaps lesser known, but these are what are called intergovernmental organizations. So rather than being led by citizens, these are led by government representatives in one capacity or another. Okay, so today what we're really going to be looking at are the IGOs, all right, the intergovernmental organizations. This class is very interested in NGOs. We're going to talk about NGOs, but as we talk about the infrastructure of the global economy, this is a governmental operation. Certainly, private enterprises are involved. There's a little bit of a blurry boundary there, but we are talking about government representatives with respect to these organizations. Okay, so in the same way that the New Deal expanded government and addressed social and economic problems on a national scale, Bretton Woods served to expand global government and address social and economic problems on a global scale. So beginning with this one organization that came out of Bretton Woods, IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or World Bank. So as the name indicates, it's focused on two things, reconstruction and development, with reconstruction clearly needing to come first. So reconstruction entailed establishing and repairing seaports or highways, power plants, manufacturing. So these sort of pieces that are integral for the establishment of manufacturing and the transportation of goods within and beyond a country, these needed to be prioritized. That's the reconstruction piece. Development later on, you had in the mid-60s and later a focus on world needs, poverty, hunger, infant mortality, education. More recently, and these issues have continued to be important, largely also picked up by NGOs. Again, this is not an NGO, this is an IGO, but a refocus on the development of the private sector in countries. These are important for the World Bank. All right, so the World Bank also actually includes different organizations, more than these two, but these are the two that I just want to draw attention to. The first is, I thought I changed that. The first is the IFC, which is the International Financial Corporation, IDA, and I thought I changed that, sorry, is the International Development Agency in 1963. So I apologize. It does not say that there. So back to the IFC. What is the IFC? The IFC emerged from the belief that a robust and strong private sector is important for a nation's economy. So I'm going to let actually this really awesome video do some of the speaking on its behalf at this point. It's maybe a 5-minute video. This is a historic video, so the quality of video and audio is not awesome. I will say, at least on my end, as I play this video, it gets super loud. So just be prepared to sort of tone it down or increase it or do what you need to do to sort of be able to enjoy this video. Again, it's a primary source piece in all its glory.
One of the most interesting and important developments in international relations and world economics has been the work of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank. Here today to speak to us on the subject of making the World Bank work for private industry is its Vice President, Mr. Robert L. Garner. It's a very real pleasure for us to welcome to San Francisco Mr. Robert L. Garner, who will speak to us now on the subject, making the World Bank work for private industry. Mr. Garner.
I'm going to start with a prediction or an assumption that if reasonable peace can be maintained for the next 25 years, we're going to see in the world the greatest growth of production and trade that the world has ever seen. We are now in process of forming an affiliate of the bank, be called the International Finance Corporation. It is designed to go into partnership with private business. A junior partner, not a managing partner, because we want to join up with private business that knows and has demonstrated the ability to manage enterprises. Its basic purpose is to help stimulate the flow of private capital by participation with it. It will operate, as I say, in partnership with private business and capital. It will supplement and not compete with private capital. If private capital is available, we will not compete with it. We'll only go in where we want it asked to as a supplement. We will not manage any enterprises. We also will not loan money at bargain rates. We will expect to get the same type of return, bearing in mind the risks, type of the enterprise, that our private partners get. If an enterprise is successful, we would hope that after it gets going, we'd be able to sell our interest out to private investors and use those funds to help stimulate another enterprise. I might say we want to do business with established business and financial people. We're not interested in promoters. There are a lot of people that I know will come around and say that they'll put up the ocean if we'll furnish the ships. We're not interested in that kind of thing. We think that this corporation will be able to aid and assist private enterprise, both private businesses in this country and in Europe, and private investors to find good, sound, profitable investment abroad. If I'm correct in my assumption that we are in a growing world economy, there will be many resources that can be developed profitably and many potential markets to be supplied.
Okay, so there's that piece. And I don't think I noted this earlier. This is a very important distinction that we need to make. We may be familiar with NGOs. NGOs raise money, they ask for donations, right? Like you see the ASPCA commercials that just break your heart. And they give monies to different countries and different needs. What's happening with the World Bank is they are not making grants and not giving monies, as that video indicates, and as I should have noted earlier, excuse me. This is a bank that is offering you loans. And these are not just any loans. Well, they're loans, they're at market value, and they come with some adjustments. This is sort of a part of one of the terms, which is structural adjustment lending. That is, if you are to receive these monies, then the individual who's lending you these monies wants to protect their investment, right? So if you're, so in these cases, what's oftentimes being required of the individual countries who receive these monies is an agreement to reconsider how their markets work. Okay, so oftentimes what was promoted is this sort of generic neoliberal free market economy template, which is sort of being imposed on a country for them to execute. And as you can imagine, there may be some strengths and some pitfalls with that sort of a system. But this is what structural adjustment lending is. So you're taking these monies, and also as, you know, in taking these monies, you are compelled to change your markets or change something in order to, you know, turn that investment into some sort of capital, so you can pay off your loans, right? And ultimately grow your company, or grow your economy. Okay, so one of the terms, structural adjustment loan, which is important to note, structural adjustment lending. Okay, sometimes you see the acronym SALs. All right, the IDA now. So some years later, the IDA emerged from the growing concern from developing countries that there were nevertheless, even though there were these sort of loans, it was nevertheless hard to, it was a little too hard to work. I don't know, I'm losing a word. So with the IDA, what you had are you're granted some leeway. So you have these concessional loans or soft loans. So with these concessional and soft loans, you're getting market rates that are below market rates, these interest rates that are below market rates, longer grace periods, including up to 50 years to pay back these loans. So you're given a little more leeway with respect to the loans, both the interest rate and paying it back. All right. I'm going to talk about the IMF. I guess just real quick, drawing attention to what could be what is a very real concern about these sorts of loans that may be paid over the course of 50 years, right? It's 2020 now, so that means a loan that was established in 1970 would be paid back this year, right? So that's just an enormous amount of time. So you can, on the one hand, maybe appreciate the leniency for the extra time, but then also recognize that comes with some other concerns as well. All right, the IMF. Some quick notes about that. This is the International Monetary Fund. This initially was created not so much for development initially. The idea was that there needed to be some organization that monitors currency and make sure that there's sort of a stable currency exchange rate that exists among countries. And the IMF was tasked with this. As time went on, it took on some other challenges. In particular, addressing concerns of countries in real financial crises. So, for instance, Indonesia in 1997, the IMF played a big role. And the IMF really perfected that structural adjustment lending that I noted within the IFC. And that is really identifying countries that are in really big trouble and lending monies, but then also being very strict around the sort of policies that would go along with that. And again, that's not to sort of, I don't mean to critique it in that sense, but thinking about, I guess, from a lender's perspective, you want to protect your investments and your monies, right? And you want to hope to get those monies back. So as a result, in 1997, you see Indonesia, for instance, having to really readapt what their markets look like in order to gain those monies. In 1989, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, you have member states in great financial need. And again, there you have the structural adjustment lendings. Also at this time being called Washington Consensus. And that is this idea that countries in real financial crisis would adopt these neoliberal fee market template economies as policy changes that needed to be made if you were to take up the monies that were being offered through the IMF. So again, you see what could potentially be some concerns.